Today we're looking at the top 10 richest rock stars of all time. Welcome to Alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Hello Aluxers, do we have a show for you today? Join us as we count down the top 10 richest rock stars that ever lived. We take a look at some incredible individuals that stole the hearts of millions by their musical talent and insatiable stage presence. Some living, some dead, these people were the brains behind some of the most popular songs of all time. In a world where pop culture will always divide opinions amongst children and parents, bands like the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, and the Beatles have endured the ages and continue to be enjoyed by young and old alike. There's something uniquely special about the best rock music that makes it timeless. Perhaps it's that spirit of rebellion that pervades the circumstances of society, or maybe it's just down to simple beats and catchy rhythms. Whatever it is, rock and rollers have been cashing in through royalties, record sales, and live performances ever since the 1950s. But out of all the baddest punks out there, these 10 have profited the most. So let's get more acquainted with these top 10 richest rock stars of all time. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. Number 10. Johnny Cash. Net worth $300 million. Johnny Cash died at the age of 71 back in 2003, leaving his son with an incredible legacy to uphold. The Nashville hero was estimated to be worth around $100 million at the time of his passing. Due to continued posthumous growth in his popularity, that number has tripled in the last 15 years. The 2005 movie Walk the Line was largely responsible for turning the next generation onto one of the greatest songwriters of all time. His low, resounding voice is utterly unique and completely unmistakable. His son, John Carter Cash, says that his father became extremely business-minded in his later years. He wanted to make sure his family would continue to profit from his illustrious career. The poignant music video for one of his most famous songs, the cover of the Nine Inch Nails song Hurt, was released at the time of his death and showed an old man weeping with painful pride due to the hardships that tortured his soul through life. To this day, it's remarked by many as one of the saddest music videos of all time. John Carter Cash says his father knew exactly how to make his image stretch into eternity amongst history's greats, and it's no accident the rock star's net worth has tripled since his death. Number 9. Dave Matthews. $300 million. Dave Matthews is the youngest rocker on this list, and one of the only ones whose fame was not born in the 50s or 60s. Dave was born in 1967 in South Africa, just as bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were starting to pick up speed. This makes the extremity of his success even more impressive. Operating as a professional musician since 1991, he's managed to amass a fortune that the likes of Offspring, Green Day, and Nirvana never could. To this day, he still sells out stadiums of adoring fans around the world. Other than his wealth of talent and fame, he's managed to build up such an impressive net worth because he owns his own record label and also produces for other talented artists. This diversification has become essential in the modern music industry, where musical talent and a large fan base alone are not enough to make one super rich. He's also won 2 Grammy Awards. With years of new music still in him, we wonder if he'll continue to climb up this list in the years to come. Number 8. Keith Richards. $340 million. Keith Richards is the lead guitarist for the Rolling Stones. Despite his various drug abuses over the decades, he's still alive and playing concerts with one of the greatest rock bands in history, including serving a prison sentence in 1968 for allowing cannabis to be smoked on his property. In 2016, he said he'd been off the hard drugs like heroin for a long time, but admits he still drinks and smokes cannabis or hashish on occasion. His musical talent, though, could never be called into doubt. Responsible for writing some of the Rolling Stones' greatest hits, he's been hailed as a master of riffs. For a man with such a great relationship with guitars, it comes as very little surprise he now has amassed more than 3,000 different ones in his collection. His huge fortune is the result of royalties, as well as a continuing ability to play at some of the most watched music events in the world, even though he's nearly 75. Mind you, he looks 95. Richards is definitely a true warrior of the rock and roll era who just won't quit. Number 7. Ringo Starr, $350 million. Ringo Starr took over from Pete Best as the drummer of the Beatles in 1963. That's easily the best decision of his life. Many have often said that he is the least musically talented of all the Beatles, but he certainly knew how to keep a beat. His songwriting was a little more suspect, but he did write the #1 classic Octopus Garden. Okay, so it doesn't have the lyrical depths and emotional involvement of songs like Yesterday or Let It Be, but it's still an upbeat melody and a catchy tune that everyone loved. In many ways, his lighthearted approach was said to be a very important factor in keeping the Beatles together when they found themselves in times of trouble. And for all of his hard work, he's managed to amass a huge fortune. He also has a philanthropic side. In 2015, he auctioned off some of his prized possessions, including some instruments that had been given to him by George Harrison, Paul MacCartney, and John Lennon. The auction raised $9 million, a portion of which he donated to the Lotus Foundation. Number 6. Mick Jagger, $360 million. Sir Mick Jagger is the frontman of the Rolling Stones. He's been dubbed as the most observed human in the flesh of all time. 5 decades after his initial success and rise to fame, he still plays sellout concerts in front of crowds of anywhere up to 100,000 people on a fairly regular basis. It's believed that no other human has been seen in person by so many different sets of eyes ever, and probably never will again. That alone does not add up to a net worth of $360 million, but the price of all of those tickets, plus the continued royalties he earns for the Rolling Stones hits, makes him exceedingly rich. In 2003, he was knighted by the Queen of England for his numerous contributions to popular culture. He also founded the Mick Jagger Centre in the south of England so that young people could have more of a chance to learn music at school. So Aluxers, we've reached the halfway point in this countdown. And if you like this video, you might also be interested in the top 10 largest landowners of all time. Click the link in the left-hand corner to check it out. Number 5. Elton John, $480 million. Sir Elton John is most famous for his prolific songwriting, flamboyant live performances, and mesmerizing talent as a pianist. He has sold over 250 million records over the last 4 decades, won an Academy Award, 6 Grammys, and a Golden Globe. Between January 1996 and September 1997, he managed to spend around $70 million in an era of pure frivolity. Part of that incredible sum was attributed to a bill of $450,000 worth of flowers, which he put on his credit card. When he asked why he spent so much on flowers, he simply said he likes flowers. And here's an interesting fact. His husband is named David Furnish. The marriage took place in 2005 and was one of the first high-profile same-sex marriages in the UK. For all of these reasons, Sir Elton remains an iconic figure renowned for extravagance as well as scandal. Number 4. Jimmy Buffett, $550 million. Jimmy Buffett is most famously known for his island escapist music. Margaritaville is the quintessential classic of this genre and made one dream of a tropical life in paradise with no worries or concerns. The fame that he gained from his music was the launchpad for his wealth rather than the reason for it. He now owns a number of restaurant chains that started with the Margaritaville restaurant in Key West, Florida, back in 1985. He also partly owns 2 minor league baseball teams, a brewery, and a casino, amongst many other business ventures. His latest plan is the biggest investment to date, as he embarks on a mission to build a $1 billion retirement village called Latitude Margaritaville in Daytona Beach, Florida. Phase 1 of the project is set to be completed by the end of this year, with 420 homes being built, and most have already been sold. If the plan is successful, there'll be around 6,900 homes in total, with prices ranging from $200,000 to $350,000. Number 3. Bono, $600 million. Bono is the lead singer of U2. His real name is Paul David Hewson, and he was born in Dublin, Ireland back in 1960. His wealth is another example of a famous musician who invested his money wisely to make it grow. He's on the board of directors for the private equity firm Elevation Partners, who owns a 1.5% stake as well as a stake in Forbes Media, estimated to be worth around $250 million. He also partly owns the Clarence Hotel in Dublin, which he transformed from a 70-room 2-star hotel into a 49-room 5-star hotel. Although he gained some of his riches from rock and roll, it's his investments in business that set him aside from the other punks that belt out ballads in front of a screaming live audience. It's also worth mentioning that Bono is a philanthropist who's often been seen as the standard for raising aid money to help vulnerable children on the impoverished continent of Africa. Number 2. John Lennon, $800 million. John Lennon was tragically murdered by Mark David Chapman on the 8th of December 1980. His estate was largely passed on to Yoko Ono and his first son, Sean Lennon. At the time of his death, it was worth an estimated $100 million, but as the Beatles continue to be popularized and expand into the digital age of music, that number has increased eightfold. There's no denying that John Lennon's solo career also produced some songs that rivaled the hits of the Beatles for their musical genius. Imagine is an archetypal example of an anti-war testament that rings true amongst peace activists from every generation. Having died a long time ago, his music still manages to pervade youth culture and inspire people of all ages. A truly great songwriter and musician. Number 1. Paul MacCartney, $1.2 billion. Sir Paul MacCartney is the only rock and roller to have broken into the Billionaires Club. His huge influence on the direction and popularity of the Beatles cannot be underrated. Furthermore, ever since their breakup in 1970, he's continued to make hit songs that grow his personal fan base and expand his gargantuan wealth. The Beatles' song Yesterday was written by Paul MacCartney and has been sang by more than 2,200 different musicians, making it the most covered song of all time. He's won 18 Grammys and written 32 songs, which have reached number 1 in the UK and the US. In 1997, he was knighted for his exceptional contribution to the world of music. In 2018, he continues to perform in front of huge crowds and released his 17th solo album, titled Egypt Station. The man certainly doesn't need the money, but he simply loves to make music, and people love to hear him do it. He's the richest rock star of all time, and one that will be hard to beat in the future. And Aluxers, that's a wrap on the top 10 richest rock stars of all time. Now we have a question for you. Why do you think so many rock stars die young? Let us know in the comments. And of course, as a thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end, here's your bonus. Jimi Hendrix died at the age of 27, having only recorded in studios for less than 3 years. Despite such a minuscule professional career, his estate is still worth $175 million today. His psychedelic songs are utterly out of this world and entirely unique. For this reason, kids from every generation continue to pick up his tunes and rock on. One thing's for sure, Hendrix is a true legend of rock and roll. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxer. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. If you want more, we handpicked these videos you might enjoy, or head over to Alux.com for the best in fine living content on the planet. Be a part of the largest community of luxury enthusiasts in the world and tell your story.